Okay, so thank you very much for your time today. Thanks very much for the invite to Napier University. My name's Simon Crocker. I'm the Director of Systems Engineering for Palo Alto Networks, American company, solely focused on cybersecurity. And we're actually based in Santa Clara, not Palo Alto Networks, just to square that one away. So I'm going to be talking about third evolution of cybersecurity, and this is our third evolution of cybersecurity. And I did read the memo, so it was about big data, machine learning, etc., etc. So I'm going to try and tailor this towards how we're leveraging machine learning around cybersecurity within our solutions, and how that benefits you as organizations, and how we also it also benefits us. Now, interestingly, I'm going to position one slight issue that many organizations are facing today. The CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, they are basically today inundated by vendors with niche services, features, technology, knocking at their door every day saying, hey, I've got the coolest thing. You really need some of this. This is really going to protect you from the latest threat. Maybe it was WannaCry, ransomware, phishing, whatever it may be, they've got the coolest thing. Now, the poor old CISO is inundated with this, so generally they don't answer their phone, social media, and they have security on their house at home. So, you know, that's to keep us guys away. So how can we actually help them? Because consuming cybersecurity is becoming an impossible task. There's a show, InfoSec, down in London next week. There will be hundreds of vendors down there, all touting their wares around cybersecurity. How do you sort out the wood for the trees? There's going to be hundreds there next week. Many of them weren't there last year, and probably most of them won't be there next year. So how do you address that? So there are some, I'm going to state the obvious here. There's an increased volume of attacks. Every vendor tells you that is actually happening. The interesting thing is, on the other side, the attacks are becoming more sophisticated. And when I say become more sophisticated, there's the throwaway term of 0 days, scaremongering. There's all these 0 days out there, and it's really bad. Yeah, there are some 0 days out there, but they're kind of the nuclear weapons of the cyber warfare industry. What we actually find is, if you talk to many of the bad guys, is that they're using standard techniques to actually get into organizations today. They're trying to breach them through SQL injection, phishing, because the lowest common denominator is the human, so why don't we go for them? So they're using some of these sophisticated or relatively basic techniques, but they're daisy chaining them together to make a sophisticated attack. So how do you mitigate against that? Deploying the right technology is very, very hard. You have to plan the evaluation, the testing of it. I'm sure you've all been there. Every new product adds overhead to your network. It adds overhead to the network, it adds overhead to the SOC, the NOC, everybody that has to manage it. And then, it's also hard to pick the winners. As I said, there's plenty of vendors out there, so which ones do you pick? It's a game of roulette. So vendors are spending more time inventing the latest hot thing. They're not really addressing the customer's need around adding value to their preventative story around cyber attacks. So fixing the consumption model is something that we believe in. Our underlying value as an organization is a belief in preventing successful cyber attacks. It's not about detection and remediation, because that's kind of clearing up the mess after you've been burgled. What we're about is actually preventing it happening in the first place. What you want is, on your house, you want window locks, the biggest door locks you can get. You want multi-locks on your front door, back door. You want a very large dog in the front garden. And, you want to make sure that you've got an adequate alarm system. That's about prevention. So that's what we believe in. So You need to think about things like how quickly can you adopt innovation? Also, how do you extend the investment that you've already made in many technologies that you've already deployed within your posture around security? And then how do you automate containment? Because once something bad happens, and inevitably will do, I'm not saying that you can't stop everything or you can stop everything. That's not what I'm saying. What we want to do is actually prevent them actually happening. So how do you do that? So we've come up with an architecture as an organization which is on three primary areas here. These are the three primary areas, building blocks, foundations around cybersecurity. You need to protect the network, you need to protect the endpoint, and you also need to protect the cloud. I've spoken on GDPR at many events, and that's kind of the bit that generally gets forgotten. Most people are obsessing around securing their endpoint and securing their data center, etc. And they forget how much data has actually gone out into the cloud. So we have this framework where we've brought together these three fundamental areas where we can actually provide preventative security around that. And then we feed up into our threat intelligence data cloud up here, which we call Wildfire. This is where we basically first hit upon machine learning. We use this cloud to look at unknown files and detect whether or not they're malicious or benign. We use many different techniques up there. We use static analysis, dynamic analysis. We use all manners of different terminology around machine learning, but that's fundamentally what we're doing up there. And then we're going to open up into the application framework, which I'll come on to in a second. So what is machine learning? You're all smart people. You've come here to discuss AI, machine learning, and every other buzzword that you can think of. You know, it seems to be the cool and trendy thing for marketing organizations to be pushing out at the moment. But when we come to machine learning, there are basically 2.5 types of machine learning that we have seen or we're using in cybersecurity. The first one is supervised learning. This is where you basically teach what is good and what is bad. So you label things good, bad, red, amber, green, however you want to do that, and then the computer learns how to classify against that. So when I look at our threat intelligence cloud, we take many, many samples, millions, billions of samples, and based on the machine learning which is supervised, we can identify what is malware and what is non-malware, okay? So it's nice and straightforward. The other side is unsupervised learning. This is where you don't actually tell, the machine learning what is good and what is bad, and you need vast amount of data around this. This is where it learns how to learn. So this is where we get into the smart stuff. And this is in cybersecurity, where we're applying this is fundamentally around things like behavioral analytics. So what are humans doing? What are machines doing when they're being compromised? What is a benchmark of normal behavior within a network, within an organization? And anything that steps out of that threshold, therefore, you need an alert or you need to take some action because that could be bad. Now, you have to look at vast amounts of data to do unsupervised learning. You need to look at both good data, bad data, unstructured data. You need to look at malicious, you need to look at benign, you need to look at logs. You need context as well. So logging is really important. Quite a few solutions that you see within the cyber industry, they look at basically alerts, which is great, tells you if something bad happened, but you don't get so much context around that. To give you the real contextual answer to some of this learning, you really need to understand what's going on. So you need logs as well. So machine learning is great and improving. as we go forward. It's great for spam, malicious domains, malware, as I mentioned. We've got our Wildfire Threat Intelligence Cloud, which can identify malware. Okay, that's great, but malware is not the be-all and end-all, and nor is spam, and nor is malicious domains. You've got to actually start looking at what users are doing, because the lowest common denominator in any organization is actually the human. Not saying that they're, anyway. So how do we do this? So let's have a look at machine learning for human behavior. The human threat is real. You're looking at insider threats. You're looking at external threats. The external threats, to be fair, are probably leveraging compute, cloud compute, every tool available to man to attack you. If you're looking at rogue nations, nation-state attacks, you're also looking at machine learning as well from their side of things, so they're using big data analytics. So what we need to do here when we come to human behavior is actually detect anomalies, as I mentioned earlier. So how are you going to do that? Now, this is really interesting area, and you need to look at many, many different aspects around the human behavior on a network. You need to look at all the standard stuff that you would have looked at in the past, source, destination, addresses and things like that, the protocols they're using, the time of day behavior. So are you seeing data going in a particular different direction? Is it going in your network, out your network? Anything around that. And this is where the unsupervised techniques come in to help the machine learning to understand what is normal behavior for individuals. And the individuals also stretches to machines, because once you get into a data center, or dare I say the public cloud, when you go into public cloud compute, what happens when an endpoint is compromised? Suddenly somebody has now taken that over, so its behavior is technically going to change. So detecting suspicious network behavior. So we've got some standard stuff up there. You know, you've got next-gen firewall logs, so you can look at user ID, well, you can on ours. User ID, so you look who the user is. You take those feeds in from Active Directory, Radius, LDAP, whatever sources you have to triangulate who the user is and give it more context than just purely an IP address, because an IP address is not really that helpful. You want the IP address, you want the destination, the port, the user, etc., but you also need some profiling as well, some profiling around the device. Is it a workstation? Is it a server, etc., etc. And then detection around devices that potentially are changing their behavior as well. So you have a server that suddenly has started communicating to another server in an unusual way, or starts uploading a load of data where before it was never actually doing that. So you need to be actually having a look at that. The more information and logs gives you a much better outcome. Machine learning is far better with larger volumes of data. There's the throwaway phrase of data lakes. Data puddles are useless, and what you really want is a data sea or an ocean. Okay, the more the better for unsupervised learning. So quality of the input of data is also absolutely critical. So the old computing phrase of garbage in, garbage out. Generic logs, source destinations and things like that are okay, but they're only going to get you certain distance when it comes to identifying a potential rogue threat within your network. What you need is a lot more context around what they're doing to work out whether or not that is normal behavior or a one-off normal behavior, or is this a malicious activity that's going on within the network. So what is needed for cybersecurity machine learning? Lots of data. I'm kind of like a scratch record here. You need a cost-effective solution for that. You know, a lot of the solutions that you see around logging are quite prescriptive around their cost models. And what we find is when we go and talk to customers, what we actually find is two problems around this. One is their incumbent security technology can't cope with logging and the volume of data that is really needed for machine learning, so they turn it off. So they only have really basic rudimentary logging on their systems. And the other one is that they can't afford to store the amount of data that they actually really need to make it useful. Okay, so high quality data gathering over time. So you also need, there's no point in gathering for the concept of machine learning snapshots of data. That's how you need to be gathering real live data constantly, and you need to be looking at that over long periods of time. Okay, the more that you've got, the more your machine will actually learn, the more that we can actually gather about the assets that are on the network and the behavior that's going on with those assets that are on the network, and whether that be an individual, a machine, whatever it may be. It could be IoT as well, it could be any device. Data lakes versus data puddles, I've already talked about that. And cybersecurity experts turn data scientists. So you've got cybersecurity analysts now that are sitting in SOCs potentially. What they're doing is poring over loads of alerts, doing really basic stuff, trying to respond to incidents that have happened. If only they had a preventative strategy in place where the alert was telling you that actually something had been seen and has been blocked, that would have been a lot more helpful. But no, they're getting alerts to say something's bad happens, you need to go and do something. So the human then squirrels away, tries to work out what he's going to do, and then takes some manual intervention a few hours later to go and stop something. Probably a sledgehammer to break a nut as well by blocking ports or IP addresses. So if you can turn these, the very scarce resource, the cyber specialist that you have within your organization, onto something a little bit more sophisticated and actually start looking at the real threat data that is going on. Is there any trends? Is there any pattern to what's actually happening with the threats coming into your organization? That would be a lot more useful. And also adapting your posture as well as an organization. You know, there is no such thing, or you shouldn't be having any such thing as a static posture when it comes to security within your organization. It has to be updated on a daily basis, hourly basis, by the minute, okay? It just has to happen. So one of the things that I did mention there was logging. Logging is a bit of a challenge. So our organization, we decided that what we wanted to do was actually bring logging service within our application framework, just to make it a lot easier. Our devices on the network, on the endpoint, and also in the cloud can upload vast amount of intel around sessions, around users, around computers, around whatever it may be, up into a logging service. This is really good intel. This is, you know, time of day, what applications they were using, the behavior that they were doing, the length of the session, how much data was transferred, etc., etc. That's all valuable data. It's equally as good as the bad stuff, which is the threat intel, but this is also really valuable to us because what we feel is that the data needs to be in one place. You know, going back to many niche vendors, many of them out there with their cool feature set or function that they want to bring in to secure your business. That's great, but where is that data going? Where are their logs going? Do they even have any logs? Do they have any consistent logs with the other vendor that you bought in last month or last year? You know, where is the consistency? So the data needs to be in a single place, and we need it consistent as well. So as an organization, we've been around for longer than 10 years now. So we have basically identified within our threat intelligence cloud absolutely trillions of high quality data points and which is great. So we've got trillions of data points from our threat intelligence side of things, but that's only giving you half the story. Going back, you need the logs as well to give you some context around the bad stuff, okay? So we've already got the trillions of artifacts sitting within our threat intelligence cloud. When you merge that together with the logging service and you do some smart things around it, then you can get some real value out of that. And that's where the application framework comes in. So obviously we've got the network foundations at the bottom. Then we bring into our cloud delivered services, because we use cloud for everything. Really embrace cloud as an organization, pushing as much data up there as we possibly can. Elasticsearch, Hadoop clusters, you know, all those buzzwords and terms that are out there, we use it all. So we're pushing that up into our cloud delivered security services. But we're not arrogant as an organization. We know that we've got really smart guys in our development teams and engineering, but we can't think of everything. There's no way we can think of anything or everything, because, you know, that's the reason why a lot of these small niche vendors are out there, because they have found the silver bullet, or they think they found the silver bullet to address one niche area. We didn't think of that, okay? We didn't think of that. We'll put our hand up to that. But for the customer to adopt that, they're probably going to have this conversation. Hey, really like your idea. How do we deploy it? Well, all we need you to do is deploy sensors all around your network, and then away we go. We should be fine. You want to install sensors all around my network? I don't think so. That's going to take me weeks of planning before I can ever get to that position, which is painful. And that's one of the blockers to the route to market for innovation in security. So what we've done is basically, as an organization, on the top there, we've opened up APIs into our cloud-delivered security services to other vendors. So we've got ourselves, we've got other vendors, and we've got customers. You can develop applications to tap into our data lake. Okay, so you can tap into our threat intelligence cloud, you can tap into the logging service to give you context, and you can come up with some really cool applications. We've already developed some of our own, obviously, but we've also been working with a number of vendors out in the cyber market, and there's 30 of them have already signed up and come to market with applications which dovetail into this. So what it allows them to do is, if you've got a really cool idea now, you don't need the data lake, you don't have to create the data lake yourself. What you can do is tap into our lake of information around logging service and also our threat intelligence. You can write your cool application. Maybe it's something to do with industrial control systems, SCADA. It could be to do with PCI. It could be to do whatever, okay? And then you can dovetail into this, get your analysis here, but your enforcement and sensors are now already in place. You don't need to go to the CISO and say, hey, just need to develop deliver a load of sensors around your network. That whole conversation is out the window now. So it kind of follows like the App Store from Apple or Google or whatever you want, whereby you can consume technology, innovation quickly. If you like it, great, happy days, everybody wins. If you don't like it, just turn it off, move on, pick something else. So this is just some of the examples of what we've got around security apps that we've already got in here. So you've got IoT security. There was a number of vendors that were particularly interested in that, automation, orchestration, detection and response, et cetera, analytics. So loads of them up there. Here's a list of them. These are the first 30. I think there's 30 up there, hopefully, if my maths and calculation was right. There's about 30 vendors there. They're already good to go. They've already developed solutions that dovetail into our application framework, which is really cool. There's a whole load more that are queued up behind this, so really good. Here's one example, analytics apps for finding sophisticated threats. So you've got, this is for detecting some of the stealthy threats with machine learning. So we've got our own solution as well, but which I'll come to in a minute. But there's various vendors there that are nothing, you know, they're not our technology. They've just got some really cool ideas, but they are leveraging our install base, our sensors and enforcement points, and our data lakes to actually do some really cool stuff. Without it, they would have really struggled to get to market. Okay, so one of the as I was just mentioned, we have our own solution around behavioral analytics. It's called MAGNIFIER. So this is a solution which sits on the app framework. So it's just basically software you enable, you turn it on up in the cloud, and what it will do, it will baseline your network from the endpoint, network, cloud. It will baseline that. It will look at all the behavior across there, and it will allow various responses to things that we believe are potentially malicious. It will alert you if need be. It will email the manager to say an individual has just suddenly downloaded a load of data from one server and uploaded it to the cloud. Well, that might be legitimate. That's why the manager's emailed. You don't want the SOC suddenly blocking stuff. Or if other behaviors happen, then you can take automated remediation to actually block it there and then, because you can enforce it down at these points here. This was the old model. If we had, in fact, this was the model that we actually bought into. So we bought a company with this technology. We bought the IP. This was their initial way of deploying this. So, Mr. CISO, this is a great idea. I think you should buy it. Well, okay, how do I implement it? Oh, well, all you need is a tap port and a probe and then a detector, and then feed it up from every single site up to the internet. Bob's your uncle. We're going to give you some great behavioral analytics. Well, it didn't really fly off the shelves because, as I was saying from the start, this is a real challenge. So this is the new version, or the new way of looking at this. So MAGNIFIER sits within the app framework. It basically dovetails into the firewalls, so it's pulling information out of them, and it's also looking at the log data as well. So really simple to deploy, but that's using all of the data. It's using machine learning. It's using both supervised and unsupervised. In fact, I think it biases more towards the unsupervised, because what it wants to do is crunch as much data as it possibly can so that it can try and work out what's good and what's bad. Okay, and so what's unique around our proposition to deliver this third evolution? It's really, we're uniquely positioned across the network, endpoint, and cloud. Our network and cloud solutions are consistent, uniform, so that's fantastic. And we can cover all the areas of cloud, because cloud is not just one thing. We can do IaaS, PaaS, and also SaaS as well. So, you know, wherever your data may be, and I'm sure it is, you may not know this already, but I'm sure that most of your organizations have embraced the cloud with your blessing or without it. So how do you control that? We also have a unique architecture for processing significant amounts of cyber data. So the logging service has been very well received by our customer base in the market, so they're really adopting that. We also, because we've embraced cloud, we have elasticity across our solutions as well. And then this one's possibly the most important, is the right data, the right context for machine learning. Machine learning gets overused a lot by lots of little vendors that have a really cool app. If you've got a puddle of data, your machine learning is not going to be that great. Okay, you really do need a vast amount of information to be able to get a decent output from that, and you've got to have the context around that. Okay, so from my perspective, thank you. That was all I had, so thank you.